And so, ladies and gentlemen, for our ninth debate of the evening, be it resolved that the Olympic Games are money well spent. Please welcome to the lectern Victor, our Prime Minister, who will speak for 2 minutes.
Esteemed Leader of the Opposition, ladies and gentlemen. Olympic Games, money well spent. Well, we don't have to define Olympic Games and money. We know what it means. Well means wisely spent. In 1986, Olympic Games were restarted by Pierre Coubertin. It was a rebirth of the old Greek tradition which lasted for for a number of centuries, 2,000 years ago. This tradition apparently was strong enough to continue into our modern age, and it has been going on now for over 100 years. 100 years is quite a good track record. Why do Olympic Games are so popular? First of all, it's a great entertainment. Romans said people need bread and circuses. And certainly this is the biggest circus of all. It's everybody enjoys it, the whole nations enjoy it. Now, it's a part of nation building. These Olympic Games are awarded to countries like Australia, China, and Brazil. It brings to those countries pride. You know what kind of a pride we felt when Olympic Games were held in Canada, in Vancouver, this spring. I think this is something which is worth every penny. And certainly there are these days, we have to point out economic benefits, and economic benefits are obvious. There are buildings, roads, stadiums. They leave these facilities for generations to be used by people who build them in the area where they are. And they create a lot of jobs in the process of building. Ladies and gentlemen, Olympic Games are money well spent. Please vote for the motion. Thank you very much.
As if he had a clock in his head, ladies and gentlemen, on that one. So, arguing for the opposition, please welcome the Leader of the Opposition, Dean, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the Prime Minister said it, bread and circuses. Ladies and gentlemen, with the Olympics, the focus is on circuses. It's clowns everywhere, ladies and gentlemen, throwing money all over the place, and not into the audience, into the pockets of the Olympic Committee itself. Ladies and gentlemen, the Olympic Games are not money well spent. They're not wisely spent. They've been around for 100 years. You would have thought that after 100 years, the Olympic Committee would have been smart about how the money gets spent, and that they would have enforced stipulations about the preparation of the host country, the bidding process of the host country, the construction of the facilities, how the money is spent by the host country, ladies and gentlemen. But that's not their concern. They're just running the Olympics and pocketing the cash from the sponsors, from the host country itself, and the like, and taking all the glory. The 100 years is not, as the Prime Minister says, a good track record. It's a bad track record of money that's wasted. Track and field, or whatever the sport is, it's not a good track, ladies and gentlemen. The Prime Minister states that it's worth every penny for the economic benefits. Well, ladies and gentlemen, those Canadians who are old enough to remember the Montreal Olympics in 1976 will understand, in fact, that there was money wasted, overrun costs, and the stadium almost collapsed on people recently. That's how well it was built, ladies and gentlemen. It barely lasted 30 years, and it's crumbling. The Parthenon, the Greek structures in Greece are still standing. How many hundreds of years later, and the Montreal Expo Stadium for the Olympics is falling apart after 30 years. Not money well spent, ladies and gentlemen. Sponsorship is now king. You sell your soul to Coke. All the TV stations who are bidding for money to get the Olympics, CTV outbid CBC this time around, and had cameras pretty much everywhere you can think of to show you minute by minute, second by second, what's happening. The whole Olympic thought what's behind the Olympics, that Pierre de Coubertin was trying to reinforce and rebirth, was in fact forgotten. It's forgotten in the commercialization of the Olympics, ladies and gentlemen. It was people competing as amateurs. Now it's professional sports people for money, contracts, sponsorship after the Olympics is done. That's not the spirit of the Olympics, ladies and gentlemen. And the money that is spent promoting that tells children and young people that's what you need to do to make it in the world. Don't worry about whether you're the best that you can be. You've got to be better than completely everybody else to be worthwhile to anybody else, ladies and gentlemen. Vote against the motion.
Thank you very much, Dean. And now to sum up for the last minute of the debate, please welcome our Prime Minister Victor for 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, Leader of the Opposition, yes, times have changed. Commercialization of sports is widespread. Whether it's hockey, whether it's athletics, whether it's tennis, anything. The world has changed and Olympic Games are just coming along. They did not reinvent it. As a matter of fact, they were the last one that introduced professionals into sports. Olympic Games, just because the stadium in Montreal did not last 30 years, and just because there was a corruption in the process, does not mean that Olympic Games are wrong, does not mean that the idea is wrong. The fact is that it was not well spent in Montreal is very unfortunate, but it was very well spent in Los Angeles, in Vancouver, in Sydney, in Beijing. You can go on and on. This is something which evolves. Olympic Games evolve as everybody else, as everything else, and they are getting better. Yes, they do provide stipulations and regulations how the facilities have to be built up to standards. And these facilities are later on used in professional and other racing sports. Thank you. Vote for the motion.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Olympic spirit live and well here in the Toronto Debating Society. Can I have a show of hands for the government, please, to support the resolution? So be it resolved that the Olympic Games are very well spent. 1, 2, 3. And those in for the opposition? 2, 4, 5. Okay, the opposition wins that one. Thank you very much.